So we're talking about this now on live TV, but apparently the internet was out of service in the U.S. Senate today, at least on the Democratic side. Democratic senators seem to know nothing at all about the allegations against Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. Some even said they'd never heard of him. Justin Fairfax, Lieutenant Governor of where? So Henry Rogers of the Daily Caller went over to the Senate today to ask, what do you think of this? And here's what he found.
I haven't even looked at the details about that. I really haven't.
Well, I think we've got to get more information at this point.
I don't know who Justin Fairfax is.
Lieutenant Governor. Lieutenant Governor.
Oh, no, I don't want to get into that. Thank you.
Uh-huh. But Bernie Sanders didn't want to talk about it at all. So instead, he pretended to take a phone call. Watch this.
Justin Fairfax's accuser, sir? Senator Sanders, do you believe...
He can't right now.
Why is that?
We're discussing something like
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So, Senator Sanders, do you believe that or no?
Go ahead.
No? Now, do you believe Justin Fairfax, his accuser, his accuser?
Okay, Ari. Okay. What time are we down?
Excuse me.
You're not on the phone. You're not on the phone.
Excuse me.
Sir. I'm asking you a question.
Hashtag believe all women? Nah, not so much. Not the ones accusing Democratic office holders anyway. The Mary Jo Kopechne standard. What is the standard anyway? Richard Goodstein may know. He was an advisor to both of the Clintons, and he joins us tonight. Now, I would just say two things really quick in preface. One, you were on a lot during the Kavanaugh hearings, and you were not one of the people saying that we have to believe all women simply because they're women. We checked the tape today, actually. So good for you. But many in your party made that case on the specific question of sexual assault. They said it's not like bank fraud or even regular assault. It's a very different category, and people who've been victims of it must be believed automatically, axiomatically. And if you don't believe them, people said this on our set and got emotional saying it, then you're a misogynist. But that standard is not being upheld with this woman. Why is that, I wonder?
Well, I do think that if we're going to apply that standard, it should be applied toward the women that have accused President Trump of sexual misconduct, too, right? So I hope there's some equality when it comes to
Let me just say that I'm not advocating for that standard. I think that people lie about everything. I've seen it. People are fallen. They're flawed. And most people tell the truth, but some lie. I've literally seen it myself. So I don't think we should believe anybody without evidence, ever. Right. But Democrats disagree with me. They say people who claim sexual assault should be believed automatically, but they're not believing this woman automatically. So what is the standard?
Well, again, as regards Al Franken, Democrats acted pretty quickly based on, frankly, evidence that was not all that damning in kind of the grand scheme of things, right? And they got him out. Talk about a rising star.
Yeah.
So
I defended him on the show.
Good to your credit. And the other thing about Blasey Ford is, you know, it was, when they say believe her, it was in the context of she put a second front door on her house because she was traumatized by what she said Brett Kavanaugh did to her. How many people do you know who have two front doors on their house?
Look, I'm not going to, but I mean, that's not the case they made, actually, long before we learned about her second front door, which I think was actually for business. But whatever it was for, Mazie Hirono and that woman from New York who's a senator, I guess, who's running for president, Kirsten Gillibrand, said, I believe her because she's telling the truth. That's a verbatim quote from Gillibrand. Yeah. I believe her because she's telling the truth. Right. They're like, who is this woman? Who cares what she thinks? Why doesn't anyone defend her? Why doesn't anyone talk to her? Are Democrats talking to her, do you think?
Look, we'll see. Look, I don't think when the evidence comes out about if there's anything more than what we've seen, you know, Democrats will have to make a decision. I think what they were talking about, though, at the time of Blasey Ford was the contrast was Donald Trump mocking Blasey Ford at a rally and before a national TV audience, mocking her.
I get it.
Because he said her memory wasn't perfect.
That's fine.
That's nauseating.
Okay, they didn't like it. I get it. Maybe that's true. Fine. I'm not here to defend that. I'm just asking, why isn't Mazie Hirono, who told us that women always tell the truth and men always lie because that's their nature, why hasn't she called this woman on the phone and asked to hear her story?
Because I think there's a difference between a Supreme Court justice with lifetime tenure and a lieutenant governor, right? Who may or may not become governor.
Does that change the nature of the crime?
Of course not.
It changes the political calculation.
But Mazie Hirono had to vote on Brett Kavanaugh. She doesn't have to vote on Justin Fairfax, right?
No, Justin Fairfax is an even more reliable Democrat than the governor he would replace. And so there's no political cost to Democrats. All they care about is politics and winning and being in charge and imposing their will. As you know, power is the only thing that matters to them. But so why pretend otherwise?
And the person that would replace him, Mark Herring, who's the Attorney General of Virginia, actually beat Fairfax when they ran in the Democratic primary for Attorney General. He's a reliable Democrat, too. So it's not the case that, oh, we got to draw the line and protect Fairfax because there's going to be a Republican. No, there's not. So, again, I don't think it's a federal issue quite yet.
But the rest of us are wondering, because it does seem like you can kill a woman, as Ted Kennedy did, literally kill her by your negligence, run away as she drowns, and you're a feminist hero. How does that work? I mean, how do I know if I'm behaving in a way consistent with the Democratic Party's views on women? What do I need to do, other than support abortion?
Well, again, you could pick out any examples. I don't want to talk about grabbing women by the you-know-what that Donald Trump and then his boosters thought that was so that was boys being boys in locker rooms.
I never met anybody who said, you know what, I was on the fence till I saw the Access Hollywood tape, now I'm all in. His supporters voted for him in spite of that, I think.
No, but they kind of said, boys will be boys. That was kind of
I never heard anybody say that. I heard people wince, being like, but I agree with him on immigration. Yeah, I agree with him on immigration and trade, and that's why I'm voting for him. I mean, honestly.
Yeah. Well,
Richard, let's get to the bottom of the story.
I hope we do.
Every night this week.
I hope we do.
Good to see you.
Sure.
She's always very shy with her feelings. Donna Brazile, another not shy person, former DNC chairwoman, of course, and co-author of For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Politics. Donna, welcome. Good to have you back on the program.
First of all, I would never miss the State of the Union. I love it. I love the pageantry. I loved it when I was a congressional staffer. And during that time, we had President George Herbert Walker Bush. And then, of course, I was there for Bill Clinton. And, of course, I've been on TV for Barack Obama and George W. Bush, and now President Trump. I enjoy it.
So, obviously tonight there's always a response that comes from the Democratic Party. Tonight it's going to be from Stacey Abrams. And Bernie Sanders also says he will also be giving a reaction to the State of the Union. And that prompted this from Amy Suskind, who spoke out. She's a feminist who spoke out. She says, why is he talking over the black woman our party chose to speak for us, disrespecting black women, the most important and reliable part of our base? And she goes on for this Stacey Abrams night. What do you say?
It is Stacey Abrams. The Democratic Party chose her, along with the Speaker and a minority leader in the Senate, because she's the future of our party. She barely lost her race in Georgia. She overperformed better than the last two presidential candidates. She fell short by 2 percentage points. She represents what Democrats hope to accomplish over the next 5 to 10 years. That is to bring about a more inclusive America, an America that embraces everyone, regardless of their background. I'm looking forward to Stacey's address tonight.
So here's a tweet from you back in 2014. You talk about all the years of covering this. And you wrote, the GOP and the Tea Party are split more ways than the last biscuit on a lifeboat full of castaways. And I guess now, when you look at all of these the responses, a couple of responses, and then all the people who are said to be running on the Democratic side, are you worried that your own party might be split more ways than the last biscuit?
Oh, no. Look, one year we had the official Republican response, and then Senator Paul did a response. So, no, I'm not afraid that Bernie Sanders, who is an independent, he is not registered as a Democrat, I'm not afraid of Bernie Sanders giving a response. We also have Xavier Becerra, who will give a response in Spanish. In my judgment, the more the better. The more voices out there, the better. But I do believe tonight, and I'm not putting a lot of money on it, but I think Stacey is going to top everybody.
So we'll be watching, of course.
But she's the daughter of a preacher. I mean, come on, the girl she has a lungs, she has a voice, she has a presence. But you know what? I think the American people just want to hear the president, and then they want to hear the response. They're going to go to bed tonight, wake up tomorrow morning, and hopefully just believe that we can come together at some point.
So apparently, that's a big part of the president's message tonight. He wants to bring people together, and I think there's a huge hunger for that in America. They want to see some compromise. What do you think Democrats should compromise on?
Oh, we have a long list. Let's start with health care. The majority of people still want us to lower prices and give people more access. Infrastructure. That's another area where I think Democrats will stand up and applaud the president.
Well, let me just stop you right there, because I just want to put something up. This is from Intercept. And it goes to the question of Kamala Harris's and others who are talking about Medicare for all. And according to this headline today, top Nancy Pelosi aide privately tells insurance executives not to worry about Democrats pushing Medicare for for all. So which one is it?
Well, we're going to have a big policy debate on a single-payer plan, Medicare for all, Medicare extra. In fact, I wrote down the other day, Medicare for all, Medicare extra for all, Medicare Advantage for all. These are all legislative proposals. We're going to have a long conversation throughout the Democratic primary process where these candidates will have to explain what they mean. Will this remove some of us from having our own private insurance? Will this expand Medicare? Will it allow people over 55 to be able to have access to Medicare? What about private plans? This is a Canadian plan, Australian plan. I have read so much about healthcare. I'm thinking about going to medical school. It is so confusing. I need to go to medical school.
Before I let you go, is there an agreement for border security and DACA, something similar to what was talked about at the beginning of last year that Chuck Schumer was in favor of?
And the Democrats were ready to compromise in December, and everything got,
Are they ready now?
I hope so, and I hope that we can avoid, declaring a national emergency. I do believe that we can find common ground. It takes leadership. Get rid of all this name calling. Let's come together. Let's find common ground. I do believe, first of all, I think we all agree no more government shutdown, but I do believe that we can find common ground.
Including border security.
Democrats have always been for border security.
A barrier, some kind of barrier.
Well, I don't get into the semantics of the wall, the fence, the slab.
Well, whatever it is that stops people from coming across illegally.
Whatever it is that prevent people from coming here illegally, but we need to have a broader conversation about immigration reform and all the other steps we need to take to protect not just our border, but protect those who have come here seeking asylum. But now they cannot reunite with their families.
Donna, thank you. Good to see you.
It's always a pleasure. I hope you enjoy it tonight.
Absolutely. We always do, right?
Absolutely.
Pomp and circumstances, you say.
You know what? I'm looking forward to the day.
Night.
I'm looking forward to the day when a woman can deliver the State of the Union.
Me too.
There you go.
Me too.
I'll come back with you, okay?
I look forward to it.
Thanks,
Donna. Good to see you tonight.
Together we can break decades of political stalemate. We can bridge old divisions, heal old wounds, build new coalitions, forge new solutions, and unlock the extraordinary promise of America's future. The decision is ours to make. We must choose between greatness or gridlock, results or resistance, vision or vengeance, incredible progress or pointless destruction. Tonight, I ask you to choose greatness.
But will those calls for unity actually work? Well, cynical Washington says, well, we'll see. Despite a more conciliatory tone, the Democrats couldn't even muster applause for the president's calls to end human trafficking. Watch.
Now is the time for Congress to show the world that America is committed to ending illegal immigration and putting the ruthless coyotes, cartels, drug dealers, and human traffickers out of business.
Why is Kamala Harris shaking her head, driving the human traffickers out of business? No, we don't want to do that. What? Joining me now to react, Congressman Brad Sherman, a Democrat from the great state of California. I'm glad he's here tonight. Congressman, I really appreciate you spending some time with us and sharing your perspective. Now, on the issue of human trafficking, I've heard so many Democrats over the years talk about the scourge of human trafficking, and we all as Americans, it's not just not a partisan issue. So why didn't the women in white and Kamala Harris get on their feet and say, good on you, Mr. President. We might not agree with you on a lot, but that's good stuff.
He begins his speech by threatening us and saying that if we do what the Constitution requires and exercise oversight and investigate what's going on in his administration, that he's going to hold the country hostage. He's held the country. Yes, he did. He's made it very clear.
Okay, obviously, I saw someone else say that on another network, so that must be the Democrat talking point tonight. And I want to play something because I think this maybe will change the way you're approaching this. These are the instant polls that were taken right after the speech. Two networks, not big fans of the president, CBS and CNN. Let's watch.
A very positive reaction from those who watched the speech tonight. 59% very positive, 17% somewhat positive, 23% negative.
following the president's State of the Union. 76% of speech watchers said they approved of what they heard. 72% said they approved of the president's ideas for immigration.
Does that make you think twice about taking away that the whole speech was about threatening Congress? The president was reaching across the aisle to you guys, and you guys were sitting on your hands.
This poll is of those who watch the speech. And
so no Democrats care about the State of the Union? They're not watching?
We care about the State of the Union, but we've soured on this president. We've soured on the racist declarations. We've soured on Charlottesville.
How is that going to create a single job, Congressman? Honestly, I get the talking points. He could have handled Charlottesville better.
I can't
get it.
force people in my district to watch the speech. Those who wanted to watch, watched. We don't live in North Korea where you're required to watch the speech.
Thanks for that education. I really appreciate that.
So Democrats chose not to watch the speech.
Okay, Congressman, on the issues, opioids, AIDS, human trafficking, criminal justice reform, Women Empowerment Summit tomorrow for economic empowerment here and abroad. These are things that I remember, been here for 30 years. Your party has championed, but this guy says it, and you guys are like, he's attacking Congress. How dare he say these things? How dare he co-opt our agenda?
We stood up and cheered dozens of times. I stood up.
Not on a lot of the issues you guys like.
I stood up and cheered more often than the last time I was at a Dodger game. We stood up and cheered dozens of times, not as often as the Republicans did. We cheered more than Obama was cheered by Republicans. We cheered plenty. But you can't stand up after every half a sentence and give them a standing ovation.
I'm not saying that. I'm
so
talking
you
about
can always find. You can always.
Human trafficking and women's unemployment. Those are pretty.
We stood
basic
on women's
things.
employment. We stood on border security.
There's the reaction
look,
right there. There's the reaction on women's unemployment. Look, there's the Ghost Gals. Now
there's the cheer.
No. They did when one of them said, "Okay, but we're here. That's good." Then the president said, "It's historic."
It's historic. And they wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Donald Trump. He does deserve credit for electing so many women to Congress. See all those Democratic women? They might not be here if it wasn't for Donald Trump.
Honestly, I think of the party of JFK. I think of the party of low taxes and lower regulations, robust military, obviously pro-life. And then I see this Democrat Party today. The party of infanticide, the party of late-term abortion. 80% of the country believes late-term abortion is wrong. And I find out what's happened to the Democrat Party, the little guy, the party of the little guy. What's happened?
We're standing up. That's why we're winning in the polls. That's why we won by huge margins last November. That's why, in spite of everything, we carried the popular vote, and we'd carry it overwhelmingly in the upcoming president.
What's the message for 2020 for the Democrats? How are you going to grow the economy at, let's say, greater than a 3.7% GDP? What's the path for doing that?
You first look at the fact that the last 2 years of Obama created more jobs than the first 2 years of Trump.
What happened to the stock market the day after the election?
Those who wanted high corporate profits invested in the stock market, and the stock market went up.
What's the percentage of Americans are invested in the market, you think, in their 401ks, pension funds?
The vast majority of stock. The vast majority of stock is owned by the top 5%. Now, it is true that a lot of Americans own a very tiny amount of stock indirectly. But the fact is that when you increase the deficit by $2.3 trillion, that's an additional debt for the average family of 5.
So now you're a deficit hawk.
I'm against the tax bill.
I am too, by the way, and I'd like to go back to the budget caps, but you guys were against those. You didn't want to do the budget caps. Obama was dragged kicking and screaming for the sequester caps. I was all for those, but a lot of big spending
is consistent with the levels it was under the Reagan administration.
What did Obama do for spending, though? The only reason you got it under control is because they had to do the sequester caps because we were blowing through it.
We couldn't afford these tax cuts. They went overwhelmingly to the top and to the giant corporations, and they impose an additional $35,000 in debt on the average family of 5.
Okay, so the blue-collar workers, and I think a legitimate criticism of both parties had been wages had been stagnating. For 18 years, really, median income stagnated. So the Washington Post has a piece last September. They say, finally, the recovery hits middle America. Blue-collar wages rising. These are ABC News. This is Washington Post. Even the New York Times has to admit that. Is that also Obama? That's not Donald Trump's deregulatory moves?
Since Trump became president, real wages for those without college education has gone down, not up. Because we've had inflation.
Right.
You say,
well,
wages are...
The Fed just said inflation is basically non-existent. That's why they're not raising rates.
We've averaged 2% inflation, and we've averaged 2% wage growth.
So you basically say the economy is not historically strong. It's the envy of the world.
The economy is providing jobs, which is a continuation of the Obama
300,000 jobs.
Fewer jobs
in the month of January.
Fewer jobs in the first 2 years of Trump than the last 2 years of Obama. Those are the statistics. You may not like.
Blue collar wages, manufacturing jobs. Over 400,000 jobs created. If Obama had the answers, why wasn't he able to do that? He kind of laughed at the idea of all this manufacturing renaissance.
We had faster job creation,
manufacturing job,
and higher wage growth for those. Look at the last 2 years of Obama. Look at the first 2 years of Trump.
Okay, so you actually think
no. The only way you get the lower wage growth is if you ignore inflation, which was lower under Obama than it is under Trump.
Okay, so you think the Obama?
So you have to
I want to get this straight. Brad Sherman tonight. I'm so glad you're on because you're a very nice person. But you're saying the economy was stronger under Obama than it is right now.
The last 2 years of Obama, stronger than right now. Well, it's a continuing trend. Obviously,
so Obama,
if you create jobs under Obama, then you create more jobs under Trump.
Why was Foxconn not coming to like Wisconsin, putting like 10,000 jobs in there? Why didn't that? If Obama had the secret sauce on the economy, why weren't all these foreign companies coming into town?
Jobs in the last 2 years of Obama than the first 2 years of Trump.
You're not answering the question. Why didn't Foxconn, one of the biggest job creators in the world, decide to come into the United States to build a plant?
One company, and I'm telling you
one of the most important ones. They make the iPhone pretty important. We want that stuff built here, don't we?
We want the job growth we saw in the last 2 years of the Obama administration, not the lower job growth.
Okay, so the manufacturing renaissance that even Trump's political enemies have to concede. You're not conceding tonight.
We have he's building.
So it's Obama.
He's building on the Obama success.
So if the economy starts to go down, it won't be Obama's policies. It'll be Trump, correct? So Trump can't win either way.
Well, if he can outperform,
this is why you guys are going to lose in 2020. You can't say there's no five fingers in front of. Well, no, you didn't, because Donald Trump wasn't on the ticket. Watch what happens in 2020. But we'll see. It is great to have you on.
Once a year, you have me on.
Okay.
Only once.
You can come on anytime you want.
Are you kidding?
We've
called you 20, 30 times.
The door is always open, and convince some of your friends. All right, Congressman, thank you so much. And up next, the liberal media spin on the State of the Union.
Former Deputy Assistant to President George W. Bush, Brad Blakeman, Fox News contributor Richard Fowler, and host of The Next Revolution right here on Fox News, Steve Hilton. Thanks for all sticking around.
Good to be with you, Ed.
Steve, you're still, I assume, on West Coast time, so I'm going to start with you.
I'm hoping, though.
You're the most alert one here. You and I were on your program a couple weekends ago, and you laid out what you wanted to hear, sort of a progressive agenda from this president. Did he meet the bar?
Yeah, I think very much so in terms of the way the issues were handled. I thought it was strong and smart on the issues. It was pro-worker, pro-family, pro-America, but in a unifying way. And in that sense, I thought it was a populist speech, and I mean that as a compliment, because, as you said, positive populism, that's the theme of my show and what I argue for, and I saw a lot of that tonight. But I think the really important thing is the subject we've just been discussing, immigration. And actually, after tonight, I'm much more optimistic that we will get that deal, and we won't need to resort to the national emergency. And I think the answer to that lies in actually something very specific that we haven't quite seen that clip, which the president said about immigration. When he's talking about the actual nature of the wall, he talked about, this is a see-through barrier, crucially, deployed in the areas identified by border agents as having the greatest need. I think in that very carefully crafted sentence, you've got the compromise.
Get out of politics and say this is what the Border Patrol wants.
Yes, and it's very interesting that was in there. Chris Coons was talking about not being specific. That was very specific, and I think it's got the makings of a deal.
Richard, you're nodding your head a little bit.
I actually agree with that. I was looking for that line myself, because I think Steve is right. That's actually where the crux of the deal lies, because for Democrats, we will agree to some sort of fencing, and we heard Hakeem Jeffries, number 5 in the House, talk about our willingness to agree to fencing. And I think there'll be other things on the table, like a fix to DACA, a fix to temporary status in exchange for that fencing. Not fencing from sea to shining sea, but fencing in areas where we think the experts, Border Patrol folks, people on the border say, here's where we think are the pressure points, and we're willing to work with the president to do this. We did it before when we passed the Fencing Act in 2006. I think we're willing to do it again. We're just not willing to do a wall across the entire border.
All right, Brad Blankman, you were in the Bush 43 White House from a stagecraft perspective. How do you think the president did tonight?
I think it was brilliant. I think his speech was comprehensive. It reached across the aisle in an earnest way. And it was just not one issue he did it. Every issue the president touched on, he reached his hand across the aisle. He offered compromise. He mentioned compromise several times during the speech. And he offered Democrats things that they should be rising to their feet. And instead, many of them, including the suffragettes, only stood when it was about them, but didn't stand when it was about us. And I think it's going to go down not only as a good speech for Trump, but one of the best speeches of a State of the Union delivered by a president.
Well, there was a moment, I remember specifically, where Nancy Pelosi did rise to her feet, maybe in an ironic, sarcastic way. Let's listen to the president talking about ending revenge politics.
But we must reject the politics of revenge, resistance, and retribution, and embrace the boundless potential of cooperation, compromise, and the common good. Together, we can break decades of political stalemate.
And so you saw the middle of that clip there. Basically, Nancy Pelosi jumped up as if to say, yes, why don't you end revenge?
You do it. Exactly. I thought that was a great moment. And I think that, you know, there's something interesting about that relationship. It's very clear
There's
to
a
me,
lot of things that are interesting
right,
about
but
that.
I think that at the heart of it, I think it's very clear to me that the president does actually really respect Nancy Pelosi. I think he admires her as a strong, tough opponent, and one that he'd like to be able to do business with. That's my impression.
And Richard, Democrats felt pretty good about how the government shutdown ended, as if Nancy Pelosi had the upper hand. But I see some of these flash polls, which are not always reliable on other networks, suggesting that the public thinks the president did pretty darn good for himself tonight. So did he stage a bit of a comeback?
I think we'll have to see. I think flash polls aren't reliable because it's those who watched the speech, and it depends on who watched the speech.
Absolutely.
I call that the petty clap there, the Nancy Pelosi petty clap, and I think it's interesting.
Why?
And the reason why I call it the petty clap is because for the president to say that we should stop the revenge politics, right, when, you know, he's one of those folks that engages in it the most. That we saw a tweet today where he, you know, went after John McCain, even though John McCain is now dead, right? Like, to attack a dead senator and a dead American hero seems to be petty. So that's why I named that the petty clap from Nancy Pelosi. Like, if you want to talk about civility and bringing this country together, don't go after a dead senator.
Brad, Stacey Abrams had the toughest job of all, perhaps. Let's listen to her trying to do something that, whether Democrats or Republicans are doing, the response to the president is always difficult. Here's Stacey Abrams from Georgia.
For 7 years, I led the Democratic Party in the Georgia House of Representatives. I didn't always agree with the Republican speaker or governor, but I understood that our constituents didn't care about our political parties. They cared about their lives.
What did you think about her trying to take on the president directly?
I don't think it was a message for the president. I think it was a message for Democrats. Listen to a Democrat who reached across the aisle and apparently worked very well with Republicans. It's something that can be done, but the president can't negotiate against himself. He needs a willing participant. So if anything, I think that message was more attuned to Democrats who are not coming to the table in good faith to work with a president who said tonight, look, border security is about many things. It's about a physical barrier, technical security, humanitarian aid, and it's about manpower. The president has been more than willing to negotiate, but you can't negotiate against yourself.
Quick response here at the table.
I just got a quick follow-up on Richard's point. We actually have the data on who was watching. That CBS poll, 76% approve of the speech. Of that audience, over half, 54%, were either Democrats or independents. That's good news for President Trump.
On Stacey Abrams, I think the speech was brilliantly done, and I think she articulated the Democratic message so clearly. She talked about her father having prostate cancer, and she's like, you can delay other things, but you can't delay a treatment for prostate cancer. You have to go into debt for that, and I think there's so many Americans struggling with that and the cost of prescription drugs, and these are issues that we really need to focus on.
Healthcare, one of the big issues both sides are going to have to tackle. Richard, Steve, Brad, appreciate you all coming in.
Thanks.
All right, we're going to take you back to Capitol Hill. There's a lot that goes on and in the background to get a State of the Union address ready. A lot that the public never sees, but our very own Chad Pergram, we put him on the case. He sees everything. He's going to take us behind the scenes. Plus analysis you can only get from Fox News politics editor Chris Stirewalt. That's straight ahead. The business of governing seems to be on hold in Virginia tonight as the embattled Democratic governor is still trying to cling to power after that uproar over a racist college photo. And the man who would replace him is battling his own Me Too controversy. Our correspondent David Spunt has the late-breaking details from Virginia tonight. Good evening, David.
Hey, Ed, good evening. It has been one political bombshell after another in Virginia, no question about it. Tonight, both the governor and lieutenant governor, they're in hot water for separate issues, leaving the top echelons of government down in Richmond in a state of chaos. On the night President Trump pitched unity inside the nation's capital, 2 hours to his south, the Virginia state capital in Richmond is in political turmoil.
Virginians have lost confidence in him. It's a very, very sad situation.
Governor Ralph Northam is fighting to keep his job after this yearbook photo from 1984 surfaced last week. Someone dressed in blackface, another dressed as a KKK member, appears on Northam's page. He initially apologized for the photograph, but just a day later,
it is definitely not me. I can tell by looking at it.
Northam is facing call after call to resign from prominent Democrats and Republicans across the country. But he's getting support in Virginia from a Republican. Quote, no matter the veracity of the photo in question, a man who has devoted his entire life to the service of others should have the opportunity to clear his name, end quote. A statement by Republican State Senator Richard Stewart, one of Northam's closest friends in Virginia politics. So far, Northam is pleading for a second chance as the calls for him to leave office grow even louder.
He is no longer in a position to lead the Commonwealth of Virginia, and he should resign.
Should he step down, his replacement, Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, is fending off an allegation of sexual assault. A 42-year-old college professor from Stanford University named Vanessa Tyson says Fairfax sexually assaulted her in 2004. Fairfax disputes the allegation.
It won't be corroborated because it's not true and it didn't happen.
Presidential hopeful Senator Cory Booker campaigned for Fairfax and said this today about the allegation.
I think we should be focusing on what's right now happening with the governor. I know you guys are going to try to focus on a lot of things right now, but right now my focus is on, again, calling for the governor to step down.
Fairfax's accuser has hired legal counsel, the same firm that represented now Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh's accuser, Christine Blasey Ford, back in the fall.
Plot thickens. Thank you, David. Some of the mainstream media now placing blame actually on President Trump for Northam's racist yearbook photo.
When did blackface become a thing again? Why does it seem as if blackface is all of a sudden front and center in America again? What's happening?
I think it has something to do with what Donald Trump has unleashed.
Young children of color are dealing with kids saying build the wall. And so I agree with Professor Cloud.
Let's bring in Fox News contributor, former candidate for DNC chair, Jamu Green, and Fox News political analyst, Gianna Caldwell. Both great to have both of you here tonight.
Thank you for having
me. Gianna, is this President Trump's fault somehow?
You know, we've been bamboozled, flat out lied to and sold a false narrative all this time. When you think about the incidents that have occurred, you think about Steve King and any other Republican that have said something that has been disenfranchising to African Americans or races, you would see a line of folks protesting. Where's that when it comes to the Democrats? I hear a lot of soft speech about he should step aside. Hillary Clinton tweeted something saying, yeah, he should step down. But where are they? This tells me that they've used race over the years and weaponized it and used it as a political tool versus something that's real and actionable against people of color. So now we have a situation where an individual should step down and he's actually racist, and they're not calling him out like they would a Republican.
So, Jamu, how somehow, because of Northam's actions, a Democrat, this is somehow the president's fault?
I don't understand the link there, but I do have to comment on what Gianna just said. There have certainly been very quick and very forcible calls by Democrats for Northam to resign. And I said on this show on Friday night as the story was breaking that the Democratic Party had to deal with the racism within our own party. And I was very proud to see how quickly and how forcibly those calls came. This man he's walking this path alone. He is a man without a party. And I do just have to say, reflecting on the State of the Union tonight, that watching Stacey Abrams give, such an impassioned plea about the plight of the Americans who suffered under the government shutdown, that she is not a governor and Ralph Northam is disgusting.
Giano, you can react to that, but I also want to add to this. David Duke tweeting tonight that he supports Tulsi Gabbard somehow, the Democratic congresswoman. You could see this tweet there, who says she's running for president. As you can imagine, Gabbard, a Democrat, tweeting a quick response, quote, "Our movement is one of love, aloha," she's from Hawaii, "inclusivity. Duke represents hatred, racism, anti-Semitism, fear. We don't want his support, period." I seem to remember when Duke said similar about how he liked President Trump, the mainstream media was in an uproar for a while about that one.
What we see is cohesiveness with the Democratic message in the mainstream media. When it came to the Covington boys with the MAGA hat, we saw much more coverage when it came to that than what we see with the Virginia governor or David Duke. I'm talking about on social media and across the spectrum. It is not the same when it comes to a Republican or a Democrat, and I don't take any solace in it being a Democrat accused of anything in terms of racism. But what the problem is, now racism has become completely and totally diluted, and we can't tackle the real issues at hand. This is where the country needs to change. And for those like Hakeem Jeffries, who says we have a white supremacist in 1600 King Pennsylvania Avenue, this is where this language has to stop. It's become too heated, and we can't get anything done because people are using language in instances where it's not true.
Jamu, I have 1 minute. Hakeem Jeffries, a Democratic leader in the House, said on MLK Day, I believe, that we have a grand wizard in the White House. How's that helpful?
Grand wizard, that was the language.
Look, I certainly have a problem with how much visibility white supremacists, white nationalists, David Duke specifically, has gotten in the Trump age. Why is it that their platforms, these hateful people, have increased their platforms in the Trump age? I don't necessarily think that Donald Trump is a grand wizard. I do think he has given voice, he has given a platform, and he has given more visibility to people who believe in that way of thinking.
But in this case, he's supporting a Democrat, not President Trump. He's supporting a Democrat.
Look, David Duke tried to softly endorse me in my race for DNC chair. It's a game. It's a stunt. We know what he's doing here, and it's despicable that he has a platform in which to sell his ideas.
Jamu, Giano, appreciate it. When we return, some of the memorable and emotional moments from tonight's speech.
So far left. Are identity politics taking America over the edge? Where the Dems could be taking their party and our country. Tucker investigates tomorrow.
We want to leave you with a look now at some of the most unforgettable moments from President Trump's second State of the Union address.
Here with us tonight are three of those incredible heroes. Gentlemen, we salute you. We are joined by one of the Apollo 11 astronauts who planted that flag, Buzz Aldrin. Thank you, Matthew. Welcome home. In the gallery this evening is a very brave 10-year-old girl, Grace Eline. Thank you very much, Grace. You are a great inspiration to everyone in this room. Thank you very much. Not only did Judah narrowly escape death last fall, more than 7 decades ago, he narrowly survived the Nazi concentration camps. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. We have more women in the workforce than ever before. Our biggest victories are still to come. We have not yet begun to dream. We must choose whether we are defined by our differences or whether we dare to transcend them.
Well, happy birthday, Judah, who not only survived the Holocaust, but also that awful tragedy at the synagogue in Pittsburgh. Most watched, most trusted, most grateful you spent at least part of your evening with us. Good night from Washington. I'm Ed Henry. I'll be back tomorrow night. See you then.